It's not a question of, am I spiritual? Are you spiritual? Everybody's spiritual. This is yours. The question is, how will I realize my deep spiritual gift?
Welcome to Point of Relation with Thomas Hübl, a podcast that illuminates the path to collective healing at the intersection of science and mysticism. This is the Point of Relation.
Lisa Miller, PhD, is a clinical researcher, professor, speaker, and the New York Times bestselling author of The Spiritual Child and The Awakened Brain. She's the founder and director of the Spirituality Mind-Body Institute, the first Ivy League graduate program and research institute in spirituality and psychology, and editor of the Oxford University Press Handbook of Psychology and Spirituality.
Welcome to Point of Relation. My name is Thomas Hübl, and I'm very honored to be sitting here with Dr. Lisa Miller. Lisa, very warm welcome.
Oh, thank you, Thomas, for having me. And foremost, thank you for being a source of spiritual life and a hub of spiritual community.
Thank you. I know we got to know each other. It's already, I don't know, 8 years ago. I lost track of time, but at the Columbia University for
Yes.
And got to
I'm
know
so
you.
grateful you came and you gave a keynote talk for us at Columbia University, our Spirituality Mind-Body Institute. And the students were so captivated. And I'm so grateful that you included some members of your community.
Yeah, exactly. So members of our community came in the mix, and it was really lovely. And so, first of all, thank you for joining us. I'm happy to have this conversation because I think you also combine things that I feel very passionate about, like science, spirituality, healing, trauma healing. I think, and many people in our community really love to combine these three elements. And so maybe can you give me like your take on how do you define spirituality? If you measure spirituality, how did you define it? What is that for you? Because that's often a word that is being understood in multiple ways.
Yes, right. Spirituality is understood in so many different ways. And of course, everyone is welcome in their own heart to have their own understanding. Through the lens of science, we don't measure or define spirituality all told. We don't make a statement that is theological or ontological. But what we can do quite elegantly is identify the threads of lived human spiritual life that are game-changing onto the rest of our lives. And we can identify through the lens of science the threads of lived human spiritual life that have a deep, innate, inborn origin. And to that avail, we have brought foremost the method of a twin study. We've brought the method of identifying through a twin study what in lived human spiritual life is indeed inborn and when realized, game-changing onto the rest of our lives. And there are two dimensions. The first is there is in every single human being inborn an innate capacity to be in a transcendent relationship. Now, the words may change around our beautiful world, and the faith traditions all have a different name for this, but built into us, hardwired, is a neuroseat of reception through which we can feel and know a loving, guiding, transcendent relationship. And the second dimension of innate spirituality, identified by science, is that as we can know and feel that we are loved and guided, we can show up for one another to be loving and guiding and feel and know one another as emanations of source, much like rays from the sun. Both forms of transcendent relationship can be understood as relational spirituality. As my word is God, as I am in relationship to God, I feel God's presence in you, Thomas. And so too, as you do your work with people who are transforming and awakening and fellow human beings awaken, there is a sense in our love for one another, in our guidance for one another, an awakening to God. The two go hand in hand. The first way we know this is through a twin study. We can look at twins raised together and twins raised apart and factor out their commonality as a function of genes and environment. And this method of the twin study has been applied to everything under the sun, from personality to temperament to IQ to risk for mental illness. Using this like a hammer, we can hit anything. So, for instance, our temperament, whether we're introverted or extroverted, is half innate, half environmentally formed. Thomas, you're very bright. You were born bright. IQ is 60% innate. Your parents said, our brilliant little baby, because you started bright. 60% innate, 40% environmentally formed. The capacity through which we experience spiritual life is 1/3 innate. It is hardwired. And yet 2/3 environmentally formed means that our choices of environment, our choice to practice meditation or prayer, our service, our transformative work, all weigh in to shape quite profoundly, impact spiritual awareness. The second methodology that's quite extraordinary is that we can track in an MRI machine. We can look at imaging, neuroimaging of the brain, and even see the circuits that are common to every human being on earth. We are inborn all 8.2 billion naturally spiritual beings, just as we're physical or emotional beings. We're spiritual beings. And 8.2 billion of us all have the same spiritual brain, the same circuits run, just like the same circuits run with vision or with hunger or with love. So we're all spiritual beings. Now, of course, there's human variability. We can build and strengthen our capacity through practice, like we build a muscle. But it's not a question of, am I spiritual? Are you spiritual? Everybody's spiritual. This is yours. The question is, how will I realize my deep spiritual gift?
Wow, that's beautiful. So that's lovely, because this touches very much on the essentials of our work, like how to get deeper and deeper in touch with our spiritual core, and how to translate this into relationality, and how relationality again is one of the superpowers to heal our pain, our wounds, our past.
And Thomas, that relationality is divine also. That our love for one another, when we're loving and guiding and healing and help each other awaken, that is a sacred act. We are instantiating the presence of the sacred. We are joining the field of life, sacred life.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, that leads me to the next question, or I have two questions. One is, because life is often viewed as human beings are kind of separate, like a bottle. So there is exactly, you see, but you're sitting thousands of miles away,
and there's one bottle.
Yeah, and there's one bottle, exactly. And so, like, this we can say an individual is separate, but as it appears to me, and as I think more and more people also look at, like, that bottle is not separate, but or a human being is not separate, but interdependent with its environment. And it's not just that we are researching separate particles, but there's something much more interwoven in reality. Maybe you can speak first to that a little bit.
I love your use of the notion of the particle, right? Because indeed, we are both a point and a wave. I say this to my students at Columbia, and immediately, Thomas, they resonate. Gen Z is so hungry for what we are discussing. The reality that there is at once a world of distinction and separateness, and at the same time, as separate as things may look, we are part of one unit of reality. And built into our brain is even the capacity to perceive and know this. There's a region, the parietal region, that literally puts in and out hard boundaries, so that we know that we each have our chair, right, in our bio bodysuit, and at the same time, we're part of one unitive force, one emanation of source. So I've never heard anyone argue that there's two sources of life. There's one source of life, and most people seem to know this in our deep being. And we now know through science there's one human porthole shared by everyone through which to feel and know this deep unit of reality. So we are a point and we are part of a wave, and we are built, hardwired in our brain, the capacity to know that, which allows us the narrative of love. It potentiates the narrative of love that when we help each other along, when you help heal someone who's struggling with trauma, and that person goes on to love and heal another person struggling with trauma, as points on a Cartesian plane, we are acting out the unit of love. This is a deep felt knowing. We're all potentiated to feel, the so-called stranger at the coffee shop, the stranger who walks in and is awkward and maybe even unpleasant and rude. They were brought by the source for you to love. That is the unit of reality at work at every moment. One of the reasons that I think there's been confusion about separateness versus separateness and oneness and separateness, always, both at every instant, is because we have made a very big mistake. Well, it was a growing pain. I don't want to call it a mistake. It was a learning and growing pain. In most of the 20th century, we thought of the brain with the contemporary, in its time, contemporaneous model of a factory making thoughts. We thought of the brain as a sealed brain in a box, like a factory, with ideas coming along the assembly line. Ideas were secondary, they were epiphenomenal, they came up from the brain, right? So the brain made thoughts. And as you know, Thomas, increasingly in the 21st century, we think of the brain not only as making thoughts, but actually as receiving thoughts, much like an antenna. The brain is like an antenna. We can receive and perceive consciousness. Consciousness is built into the fabric of everything. All reality, these magnificent sisters and brothers by my side, the trees and the plants, consciousness is everywhere. We can dial in, we can tune in to this deep consciousness. Now, this idea that the brain receives thoughts is very comfortable to much of Gen Z. Gen Z grew up pulling information out of the air, right? And this idea that we can access all knowing is very comfortable. So when we have discussions like this, Thomas, it is nourishing, it is enlivening to the felt reality that's already in so many young adults.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, that is very congruent with my experience and also my experience of many people growing and getting ignited again. Part that is like seems to from inside something's emerging and we are recognizing. It's more like recognizing something we knew but kind of seemed sometimes dormant, and now it's being reignited. And that's beautiful. Yes. I see this in many groups.
And to give it voice as you do, we talk about that here. It is real. We can share this consciousness and then act on it.
Exactly. So when we say there was a movement from like a more religious-based life into a more secular life, and it also is that, there is a certain percentage of people saying, listen, there is no divine reality, there is science, you can prove many things through science, and maybe many not because we're not there yet. But they would argue, okay, that reality is not true for me, and I live a secular life. What did you see in your research, or what do you feel is the effect of that on our brain? So how do we, what do we lose, maybe don't get nourished enough, or get nourished in different ways when we let go of a spiritual dimension and say, okay, one day we'll be able to measure everything and the universe, and we will prove that was all our imagination. So let's speak a little bit about that. How do you look at that?
So I think in much of the 20th century, Thomas, there was a tendency to see two camps of people. There were some people who would say, I am a very scientific person. I am highly rigorous. I only take to be true that which can be shown by science. I don't know what the spirituality and religion stuff is. Science has not proven that. Other people have said, I know in my heart the spiritual reality to be true. I may see that through my religion or see it outside of religion, but I know this in my heart. I don't care what science can show or not show. But finally, it turns out science and spirituality really can go hand in hand, that science as a practice is really only a lens. That's all it is. And we can point that lens, whether it's a microscope or a telescope or an MRI study, at a broad number of questions, including the nature of spiritual life in the human being, the two threads of which about which we're speaking now. We can point the lens of science onto the human being, an MRI study, a genotyping study, a long-term clinical course study, and look at the nature and impact of spirituality in the human life. That is a union of spirituality and science. Now, again, the scientist is not claiming the nature of reality all told. The scientist here, is the clinical scientist, is simply saying that we are built to be spiritual beings. This is how we are built to see and know. And when we do, life unfolds quite differently. And the scientist is saying a little bit more, which is, and when we look at the nature of relationship between human beings, or between human beings and fellow living beings, we see that this deep unitive consciousness is in us, through us, and among us, that the antenna brain is receiving and perceiving deep consciousness between human beings, between all living beings, and where science needs to now heel strike, put a foot forward to adventure forward, is what then, how do we see the fingerprint, the image of source in and through all consciousness? My fear for science is that we not repeat, please may we not repeat, a radically anthropocentric science where the human being is in the middle and we make everything happen and we control everything. I think it's much more full of possibility to understand consciousness and sacred consciousness in us, through us, and among us. And the human is part of this field of life, able to contribute and receive and perceive along with everybody else.
Very, very, very much so. So that brings me that there are so many questions. I think we need to have 2 or 3 of these conversations.
Lovely. Good.
And because when you look, let's take that, if we take that seriously, and we look at, for example, like, as you said, we are very human-centric. But if you look at how we interact, for example, with animal farming. So, and then not only we interact with animal farming, which sometimes is almost like modern torture, but so we create something if we do it that way. There are other animal farmings that are way different and much more attuned, maybe, and much more open. But I'm wondering, in this unity field, we are also creating how we treat each other, how we treat animals or plants, the planet. Everything has an effect. So let's speak a little bit about the effect of, and what is it in us, and maybe also scientifically and spiritually, what is it in us that feels that certain things are okay, they're kind of aligned with that inner knowing,
Yes.
and there's certain things that are not aligned with that inner knowing, but we still are able to do those. You know, it's not so that kind of compass tells us, listen, you're leaving the north and you're going east.
So we know, we do know.
Exactly. We do know.
Our spiritual compass knows what is aligned with the path of love, of truth, of generativity, of life-giving. Our inner compass knows.
Exactly.
Yes. And that is completely consistent with the notion that we are receptive beings. We are an antenna, receiving and able to really, you put it so beautifully, align with the truth. You know, something in science that is so beautiful, that witnesses, holds a mirror to what you're already saying, Thomas, is this. When we look at people to recover from pain, from trauma, post-traumatic spiritual growth, from depression, developmental depression, into an awakening, an awakening where they feel the presence in and through us. What we find is that in people to recover from trauma and despair through an awakening, there's a tendency in EEG studies through the lens of science to give off a certain wavelength in the brain, which is high amplitude alpha. High amplitude alpha. High amplitude alpha of the spiritually engaged brain is vibrating at the very same wavelength that goes by another name in another field, and it is Schumann's resonance, the constituent wavelength of life, of nature, from the Earth's crust up 1 mile all the way around the Earth. The constituent wavelength is Schumann's resonance. What does that mean? It means that the felt sense of oneness, the relationship with all living beings, the sense of connection and family and unitive communication that we feel with all living beings is mirrored in the sameness of the wavelength. The oneness is absolutely real. So Eden, sacred Eden, is not somewhere very long ago and very far away. Eden is here right now. And it's our opportunity to enter Eden through our seat of being, through our awakening of the spiritual heart.
No, that's very beautiful. That's very beautiful. In my work, I also speak a lot about this constant wave that we can enter or feel like out of sync with, but basically it's all the time there. And as you said,
Oh, yes. Oh, Thomas, you're saying something so beautiful. I heard you say there is a rhythm or a wave that we can feel, right? And I absolutely respond to that. I want to share with you a story. When I feel aligned with the rhythm, I can feel what you speak, the rhythm of the universe. And in childbirth, women feel this very strongly. Ba-boom. But boom, it's literally like a drum, but boom, you can feel it as a woman in childbirth. It's the same rhythm of the universe. We can feel it and know it. When I listen and I align with the rhythm and walk in step with this deep unitive rhythm, I am in relationship with all living beings, and the synchronicities are abundant, and I'm able to give and contribute, and people show up in my path. We're part of one symphony, and that is the baseline of the symphony. Now, the tragedy is I know in my heart when I am not with the rhythm. There's a snaggly, urgly, nasty feeling I feel when I'm off the kilter. And when I've been in that space, often I'm in overdrive. I'm pushing hard. There's something I think I want. I call it narrow achieving awareness. I've got to get there on time. Why did he say that to me? How will I get that interview? Pushing. I'm not part of the rhythm. And I have tragically, that is the time where I'm driving on the highway and my heart breaks. I've hit an animal. Right? That is to my peril and every living being around me. When I have not listened to the beat of the universe, when I've allowed myself to be in overdrive, to have the snaggly, urgly feeling. And all I needed to do was take a moment, and it could be 1 minute. And for me, pray. For some people, meditate, reconnect with nature, and rejoin the rhythm. And then life is abundant, and we are where we are, and we are then we are in Eden, and the vibrant porthole is through us. So the rhythm is everything. And I do think that we can hear it at night in the cicadas. We can hear it. Everybody else is singing along. And when I've hit an animal, it was the most painful moment in my lifetime. It's the most painful moment in my life. I knew I was off the path. The animal was on the path. The animal was in beat with the drum.
Beautiful.
So they were not a stupid animal that crossed the street. They were in beat with the drum, and I was off the beat. And I know that it's a terror. And of course I prayed for forgiveness. I apologized profoundly multiple times to the spirit of the animal. I asked God for forgiveness. I mean, that's where I then was. But I can say that would not have happened had I been moving with the rhythm that is accessible to us in our heart.
I think you're saying something very profound for our relationship with everything, of course, and also in our society. I think we see this very often when we are in sync with that rhythm. We call it synchronicities, we call it flow, we call it all kinds of things, but we anyway meet the right people at the right time, and we can suddenly feel this supportive whole that everything is supportive of that movement, and that's such an effortless state. And then we can also feel when we are out of sync. And you said something beautiful. You said, if when I'm out of sync, then I need to, there are ways how to come back into synchronization with that wave. And I think that's what spiritual practice is about. It's exactly to get us back in sync.
And all the animals are there. All the animals are there.
Everything, exactly.
All life is there. Eden is right there. Yeah.
Exactly.
And we just need to awaken. And to awaken, it's not just for the most pious or the best meditators. We can all take 1 minute and awaken. Use our awakened brain. We have an awakened brain. We all have it. Nobody's left out. There's no one who can't do this. We all have an awakened brain.
So maybe you speak a little bit about this, because I completely agree. That's the most democratic, that's the most fair, that's accessible for everybody. So let's speak a little bit about your book. You also wrote a book about this, like the awakened brain. And let's speak a little bit about this. When you say the awakened brain, we all have it. Maybe you can share for our listeners a few more sentences about that.
Yes. So when we look at people of all faith traditions, whether I am Hindu or Catholic or Christian or Jewish or Muslim or Jain or Buddhist, whatever my tradition may be, spiritual, but not religious, there's the same neurocorrelates that are running when we feel a deep awakening, a sense that we are loved and held and guided and never alone. And I'll give you an example. Oftentimes we can be in a struggling, snaggly, urgly, distressed state of mind, off the rhythm, not aligned. And the narrative goes like this. I'm wondering, why did I not get the job? Why the person who got the job was less qualified than me? I know that she was less qualified than me. I said everything right. A plus B plus C. I did everything right. Why did I not get that job? I'm such a loser. It's because I'm such a loser. It's because I speak in a way that people don't like. It's because I'm not as smart. And then suddenly, I saw light in the trees, and I know that the universe has a path for me, or God will open the right door for me, and I am where I'm supposed to be. Okay. That is a major shift from the view that we control everything, what I call narrow achieving awareness. I mean, of course, we need to plan and make an effort and strategize, but that's a tiny little sliver, less than 10%. And really, where most of life is born is in the dialogue with the deep universe, the force that's in us and through us and among us. The work that you do, Thomas, so beautifully with many people, to open to the deep force that's in us, through us and among us, to listen, to say, yes, that synchronicity is real. Reflect on what it means and act on it. This is a living, in fact, may we do a practice
right now?
Yes, good. Okay. This is called the road of life. The road of life. Okay. I invite you to take 3 breaths to clear out your inner space. I invite you to locate a time where you wanted something very, very much. You wanted that job. You wanted him or her or them to say yes, to be with you. You wanted the home, the apartment, the money, the opportunity, and you did everything right. A plus B plus C, the equation was intact, absolutely correct, tactically. That red door was yours. And so A plus B plus C, you have done it all. You reach for the handle of your red door, but it's stuck. And you cannot believe it's stuck because you have done everything tactically, strategically right. You might be shocked. You might kick the door. How could that impasse be? You might even be depressed. But only because that door is jammed. It is stuck. You must shift. You shift 35, 60, 100 degrees. And over here is a wide open yellow door. You might not have heard of yellow doors, ever known of their existence. The yellow door opens and you meet someone who makes you feel alive. You find a mentor who sees in you what you did not even know was in yourself. The yellow door leads to a landscape that has so much to do with who you are and where you are today. The yellow door was not what you had wanted. It was better. And foremost, better for you. And as you sit back now and you think of that stuck red door and the hairpin turn that led to the wide open, shining yellow door with a possibility that you had not even known existed, was there anyone at that hairpin turn telling you information, pointing you with a story to the wide open yellow door? Was it a guide, a teacher, a counselor? Was it a dear grandparent or friend who, for the first time, shared a story? Someone you met for 2 minutes at the coffee shop, a trail angel pointing you to the open yellow door. And finally, stuck red door, hairpin turn, trail angel, and wide open yellow door that has so much to do with who you are and where you are today. How really are the most important parts of our lives found? Is it narrowly through strategy? Of course, we have to do our share. Or are we less makers of our path and more discoverers of our journey? Is there a deeper force in us, through us, and among us? Where in your road of life is God, the universe, whatever word is your source? Is God in the open yellow door and the stuck red door? Is the force of life in the trail angel and in your being an open system to receive and perceive and give in dialogue with the source of all life? Have you been on a spiritual path, your spiritual path, all along? And I invite you back.
Yes, that's very beautiful. That's very beautiful. I can share from my experience that this is very much the way how I experience life. And every time there was something, when something doesn't go or flow in one direction, I always found that life rerouted some of that energy into something else that went way beyond, or it's kind of trusting that turned out in my life to be absolutely right. And so I want to confirm this feels very, very aligned. If certain things don't move, it's not that we don't, and it's not that we don't, as you said, prepare or we put energy into some things, but if it really feels like it's not moving, then there's always a greater wisdom to it. And I can completely confirm that in my experience, at least, that's true.
And Thomas, so often we think that red door, I want that red door so much. Why did I not get that red door? Right? But wanting that red door is based on information today, backwards. It's all outdated, really. The red door is only historical in terms of why I want it. But the yellow door, as you suggest, has information that has yet to unfold ahead of us.
Exactly. Beautiful.
We don't know the glory on the other side of the yellow door.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I think that's also where trauma comes into play. Maybe we speak about that, and maybe we can have another conversation to get to all the other
Please. It's so important. Your work, Thomas, your work with trauma is exactly what every bit of science says is the only way through trauma. There is one path through trauma, and that is a spiritual deepening, a spiritual growth, an awakening, to love more profoundly. It's not like, there's psychological minus spiritual paths through trauma. That is not going to take us there. Through the lens of science, we've looked at many people who have been in therapy for many years, and they still have spiritual injury. We talk a lot about moral injury. Moral injury is when the world as I know it no longer holds. But under moral injury is often spiritual injury. And the only way through spiritual injury is a direct spiritual connection to open to God, universe, loving presence, to know who we really are to one another, to feel the guidance. The only way through trauma is post-traumatic spiritual growth. So in the end, as you know so well, it is not recovery. We're not back to baseline, right? It is a growth. It is a renewal.
Beautiful. Yeah, that also completely resonates with how indeed, and I think that's also true for the collective dimension, because I think the only reason for this non-synchronicity are the scars that we don't see that create this disorganization, and even the possibility of not being in with that wave. And so and that's why I also think a spiritual dimension is important. Otherwise, the way how we look at individuals, if it's only the psychology, is too small. And then when we open, then there's much more resource available, and I think that's so true. So maybe, I mean, you did it already. If there is anything else, because I'm sure many people that listen here, they have a similar experience or a similar interest at least. That's to how to combine or why our spiritual practice is important for our healing,
Yes.
our growth, and also, as you said, for the post-traumatic.
Yes.
Growth.
So, Thomas, shall we end on a practice? May we do that? End on a practice?
I love practices. Yes.
Beautiful. This is a practice which opens up a transcendent relationship with who we really are, who we are to one another in a deep, sacred, transcendent relationship, and to our higher power, whether our word is God or universe or source or Jesus, Hashem, Allah, whatever our word is, right? Remember that spirituality is your birthright. It is innate. Religion is a gift of the environment. Religion is not innate. It is a gift, whether it's Hindu, Catholic, Jewish, Muslim, it is environmentally transmitted. And for many people, religion can cultivate their natural spiritual core. 2/3 of people say I'm spiritual and religious, but spirituality is all of ours, whether or not we are religious. Whether or not we are religious. So this invites you to awaken your natural spiritual awareness. And what I'm going to do is share the practice as it was shared with me. I always thank my teacher, as Thomas, I'm sure many people now thank you. I thank my teacher, Dr. Gary Weaver, and then I will add a bit that is related to trauma. Okay, good. Okay, I invite you to take 5 breaths and clear out your inner space. In your inner chamber with your eyes closed, I invite you to set before you a table. This is your table. Into your table, you may invite anyone, living or deceased, who truly has your best interest in mind. Anyone living or deceased who truly has your best interest in mind. And with them all sitting there, ask them if they love you. Ask them if they love you. And now you may invite your higher self, the part of you that is so much more than anything you may have or not have, anything you may have done or not done, your true, eternal, higher self. Your higher self, and ask you if you love you. And now you may invite your higher power, however you know, whatever word is yours, your higher power, and ask if they love you. Ask if they love you. And now with all of those people sitting here right now, what do they need to tell you now? What do they need to share? What do you need to know right now? And when you're ready, I invite you back. This is your counsel, and they are always there for you. It is your birthright to be able to receive and be in deep, loving, guided relationship with all members of your council. This is your awakened brain, and no one can ever take this away from you. This is your divine being, body, mind, and soul. In the case of trauma, we can go back to counsel at any time. Who shows up may change depending on where we are, and we can ask what's on our heart. In the case of trauma, we can invite the trauma to take on a persona, take on an image. And very often the image can be surprising who it shows up as. It can be some strange looking creature. It can be someone that we hadn't thought of in a long time. And we can bring that person with us to counsel, show up at counsel with that person, and ask right there before our counselor, those who truly have our best interest in mind, our highest self, our higher power, what say you? And that is a divine response. It is a spiritual visualization that welcomes the dialogue.
That's beautiful. Thank you for this lovely practice. And also the synchronization of maybe our hurt parts with our timelessness and divinity. So that's a lovely resource. Lisa, I would love to continue this conversation if we can. There are so many.
Lovely. Yes, you are my soul brother, Thomas.
Yeah, I feel there's so much resonance, and I think we could pack much more. Get started now. There's so much more to talk about. So
how lovely to join you. Thank you for including me in your community, your very sacred community. Thank you for what you're doing in our world. Being part of, you're a catalytic hub, right? You are a catalytic hub of transformation. Welcoming in source.
Yes. Yes, so thank you, Lisa. This was great. I think
thank you.
A lovely inspiration, and everybody will take a lot out of this conversation. And maybe we do a part 2, and then until then, I wish you and your friends around you. All right.
Yes.
I wish you a beautiful time.
Beautiful. Thank you. Blessings. Good.
You too.
Thanks for listening to Point of Relation with Thomas Hübl. Stay connected and get updates about new episodes by visiting our website, pointofrelationpodcast.com, and by subscribing to the Thomas Hübl YouTube channel. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share about us with your community on social media. Thank you. We appreciate your support.